Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Kong Skull Island. If they're ever going to make a new King Kong movie, a movie about Skull Island is probably the only one I would ever have any interest in, and probably the only way to make another King Kong movie. We've already had it remade a couple of times for whichever generation or era or whatever, and Skull Island is probably the most interesting thing about King Kong that they haven't just made its own movie about. It's usually the part of any King Kong movie that you're like, wow, that seems really cool. Can't we just stay there instead of like going to New York and learning about love and the Empire State Building and stuff? We'd much rather stay on Skull Island and see a bunch of cool creatures, and it's always the thing that made you wonder, like, what kind of weird creatures and T-Rexes and dinosaurs that were always in Skull Island, and you always saw that and you always go, wow, Skull Island seems really cool. And finally, after 84 years of King Kong stuff, they've finally given us Kong Skull Island. Now, that's kind of the best part of Kong Skull Island is its concept. Works for a very concept-heavy time, showing us the only King Kong movie we probably ever asked for, other than maybe the first one, and in a lot of ways it fulfills on all those 12-year-old or 8-year-old dreams of what Skull Island could be, giving you a perfect monster blockbuster movie for an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old. In a very stupid blockbuster Hollywood monster movie way, Kong Skull Island really works and actually finds a way to avert from doing like the creepy racist imagery that Kong's so famous for, and having Brie Larson's character not actually be a love interest in it. It kind of ignores that and just makes it into a giant blockbuster monster movie with lots of explodies, cool action sequences, and nothing else. And when it works in that kind of dumb fashion, it's actually really, really cool. It's so dumb, it's almost perfectly dumb, but it's also not smart enough to realize to stay away from even trying to hint that it could be something more, and its failings at that as well. And I think that's kind of the biggest problem with it, is it acts like it could do something more. It acts like it probably needs a theme, a reason to have this Vietnam setting, kind of the similar thing as the recent X-Men Days of Future Past and things have had, where you're just like, why does this take place in the 70s or the 60s or the 80s and stuff, other than just because? Kong Skull Island does that as well, since I'm not actually sure if this director has seen Apocalypse Now or is just aware of it as a movie itself, or has seen the poster of it, since that's the only imagery he actually uses in this movie. But when it's dumb, it works quite well. It's just when it tries to act like it's smarter, it kind of falls completely apart. Fictitious company or whatever, Monarch, from the original Godzilla movie, which I'm sure you don't remember, and most of you will probably just think of the Venture Brothers like I did, but is a government company. They spelled out the anagram, but has monsters and things in it. I don't remember the anagram, and I'm sure someone in the comments, actually, I'm half 50% sure no one knows. They're trying to get the government to go to Skull Island to figure out what is potentially there, and they mount an expedition with John Goodman and the guy who played Dr. Dre in Straight Outta Compton, and they go with the military to back them up just in case, and hire Tom Hiddleston, who's good at like tracking and being a military guy or whatever, and Brie Larson tags along because she takes photos, I guess. And why she'd come to a secret kind of scientific expedition that's sort of top secret doesn't really make a lot of sense, but as again, if you start to think about this movie, it sort of doesn't work. They go to Skull Island and find King Kong, who bats down all their helicopters and destroys a lot of stuff, and they're stuck on Skull Island for 3 days as they have to work their way from one end to the island to the other to get there for the refueling planes that will hopefully take them off Skull Island, to get them away from all the crazy monsters and crazy terrain and spiders and skull walkers, skull killers or whatever, and all sorts of other creatures who are going to come after them, and hopefully they can get off of Skull Island before all being killed. The thing about Kong Skull Island is there's usually like blockbusters that come out every year that when I see them on TV, like going through the TV guides through HBO or FX or something, I'm like, oh shit, I totally forgot about that movie. Then if I put it on, I'm like, oh, now I remember why I totally forgot about that. And Kong Skull Island is no different from any of that. I will probably forget about Kong Skull Island in a year, most likely, but if I were to put Kong Skull Island on, I would actually really enjoy it. It's actually really fun at being a ridiculous dumb blockbuster. It's very concept heavy, and I love that about it. And I actually like concept heavy films. It's kind of like, as a film buff, and if you're into movies, you love movies with a ridiculous concept. And Kong Skull Island, of all the Kong movies that aren't, you know, like the original, this one at least conceptually has a cool enough concept, and I think it's kind of eye-catching for that. but also gets like what's most important about it, which is mainly the action sequence. Now, its fault is acting like I would semi care about any of these people in it, and before you go, you know, the typical monster movie thing where you don't care about the people, you really care about the monster. This doesn't tease you as much as Godzilla, and is probably a much more enjoyable movie than Godzilla. I think the thing about the previous Godzilla film is that director, Gareth Edwards, had a semi-point to what he was doing, which is probably stronger than any sort of point other than this is dumb and fun, enjoyable monster movie. In this one, it works better as a whole movie, but I think Gareth Edwards was working for more of an interesting point with his direction, trying to do a Spielbergian thing or whatever. It didn't work as well, and that Godzilla movie really does not hold up to rewatches, whereas Kong Skull Island, I think will, at least I feel that way now. It's kind of like one of those movies like years later you'll put on, and without the context and existing in more of a vacuum will probably be a little more enjoyable, and you're like, how come I didn't freak out about this more? Or at least if you saw this with like an 8-year-old, they probably think it's awesome, and you'd be like, holy shit, you're right, Kong Skull Island is really cool. That's the part that works, but I think the things that really don't is that not only do you not care about all these people who are in it, the narrative doesn't work in a way where you probably could care about many of them at all. I've often talked about if you see a film about a large group of people, they usually pick 2 or 3 that you really follow, and the rest of people are there, but you can't really follow like 20 people unless you're like Robert Altman or something. And Kong Skull Island, I hate to break it to this director, he's not Robert Altman at all. And you can really tell that throughout this film, because at certain points there's 2 groups, and then Toby Kibble by himself, and it's just like that's too much going on, and they're large groups, and you're having to know them, and you know some of them before, but then like there's one actress, this Chinese actress, who just shows up randomly, who we're sort of supposed to care about, and it feels like there's something missing, and you never connect with her because you're like who the fuck is she? Like it's really weird. But also like there's so many characters in this, I'm probably going to forget talking about someone. I'm not trying to be a jerk or something, like I honestly expect to talk about this review and miss a character because there are too many. They focus sort of on certain ones, but not really, and the ones that they even did felt like real thinly veiled like sketches of characters. They weren't full characters, particularly like Brie Larson, who even why her character's there makes like seriously no sense, like why they would just go like, yeah sure, member of the press for this sort of top secret thing, but it's not really top secret, but she can come. Doesn't really make sense, and like certainly she's like, oh there's something up with this, but it's not like the government even cares that much. That whole thing doesn't vibe at all. You don't really get any moments alone with anyone either. This film just moves so quickly. I felt like it was in fast forward, but not in a crazy frenetic like unenjoyable way. I thought it really actually worked for it. It was just like it moves so fast you could honestly go through this movie without thinking about how dumb it is, because it moves so fast it doesn't give you a moment to doubt it, which I think is actually kind of smart in a way. I find a lot of the direction interesting because the director of this made Kings of Summer, which I didn't really like at all, and then suddenly he makes a film like this and it shows like no auteurish voice between them, which either shows he's like one of those directors who has no voice, or he's a lot better at blockbusters. I'm not sure which, as most of the decisions were probably chosen by Legendary and probably not by him. In the understanding that most Hollywood studios hire indie directors mainly to get the acting better in these blockbusters, I don't think he did that job well at all, although I think overall this film was directed on a fun level a lot better than most of them, so that's cool. The main people who are good in this are character actors, from people like Shea Wingham to especially John Goodman to Samuel L. Jackson. They're the real stars of why you want to see this movie. Brie Larson and Tom Hiddleston are kind of just the movie stars in it, and it really kind of shows. And even though they're not super like box office movie stars or whatever, I think Tom Hiddleston does his best being like kind of the English explorer from a 1940s Kong movie that never happened, and even is named after the author of Hearts of Darkness, which is like groaning. The main star of this really is John C. Reilly, who really steals the show. I think he's the only acting reason to see it. He's probably the only one who steals the movie more than anyone, although I did like a particular scene between John Goodman and Samuel L. Jackson, which made me go, why didn't you just kill everyone? Just have this party just be Samuel L. Jackson and John Goodman. That sounds like an awesome movie. Samuel L. Jackson and John Goodman try to avoid King Kong. I would love that movie, and probably way more fun. I did like seeing Jason Mitchell, who we don't get to see enough of, and I guess the criticism of this film is they picked a lot of hot names from the previous Oscar season and signed them all up to do this King Kong movie, but really the people who made this movie enjoyable were character actors, which is usually what they do. John C. Reilly being the most extreme example. I thought John Goodman sold a lot of stuff much better, and when you had those character actors working, this film was a lot more enjoyable. I think Samuel L. Jackson, sure, he plays the same notes he's played in a million different movies, but he's so committed to it, you honestly want to follow him and believe him. And if I'm going to see Samuel L. Jackson play the same role over and over again, I'd much rather see him play it at this caliber rather than like the millions of other movies he's he's done it with. Sure, he's better in like the Marvel movies and such, but I actually kind of liked him in this. The 70s thing didn't work. It's not trying to do the Vietnam thing. It fails at being a Vietnam movie whatsoever. After a certain point, I sort of forgot about it and went like, oh right, they're in Vietnam. I mean, they play Running Through the Jungle while they're running through the jungle. It's not made by someone who understands the 70s or 70s filmmaking. This isn't made like a 70s movie. It's made like a 2017 Hollywood blockbuster, but it's really good at doing that. I'm kind of wondering why we do these kind of period specific blockbusters now, because it is like the X-Men movies where I'm like, what are you trying to say with this? And with the X-Men films, it sort of started to fall apart. With this, it's like, it's so dumb, you kind of are cool with it, but like the Apocalypse Now thing, it's really just the sun. I really wonder if this director has seen Apocalypse Now. Like, I'm still like wondering, like did he? Because there's like certain things, like I think he saw it a while ago, but I don't think he's like familiar with it, or maybe he just saw the Redux or something. I don't know. It's really just like a dumb movie on Skull Island, and I think in certain ways it's probably more enjoyable, fun Kong movie than even we had from Peter Jackson. Keeps on that spirit that he had in his Skull Island sequences. They're not as well executed, and I wouldn't say a lot of these action sequences necessarily are in terms of how technically put together they are. It's only really the opening action sequence with Kong and then the end sequence, which are really awesome. Some sequences in between, but there's so much fun and joy going throughout it. It seems like they're having so much fun with it. They don't really take a moment to have these characters like sit down and take in things. A lot of times they'll say, aren't we going to talk about what just happened, which characters say several times in this movie. It seems like they're really pushing to act like they're putting in more to this than just being a dumb action movie, but not enough that it's not enjoyable. I think that's probably one of the best things about it, is it doesn't try to act like this film has a deeper meaning, even though they're selling it on the fact that it might have a deeper meaning, and using the 70s setting in Vietnam kind of insinuates that that would be there, but they kind of drop that and go, I mean, wouldn't it be cool if a Kong Skull Island movie took place in the 70s? And I guess on that level, yes, it was cool, and yes, I had a good time just watching this dumb, silly King Kong Skull Island movie. And I think if you're seeing Kong Skull Island and you want to see a silly, dumb, explodey action film, it'll work on that level. Does it break through to the higher art of monster movies sometimes can be and try to expand and do things that even like Shin Godzilla did? No, but I think one of the things I was thinking about with Shin Godzilla and the last American Godzilla, the more recent one, is that they try to do more with the genre. And oftentimes when I hear people disappointed with those movies, they say, I just wanted to see giant monsters attack each other and do ridiculous, silly, stupid things and have a good time, like with a beer on my couch or something. And Kong Skull Island does that very well. So it's probably the monster movie we probably wanted, but it does it in such a blockbuster, silly way that almost kind of washes over you and you're done with it. But then when you catch it on cable or Netflix or whatever we're watching in 5 years, I'm sure you'll have a really awesome time with it and be like, man, that Kong Skull Island movie was pretty cool. It doesn't really get me excited for the expanded universe, which I guess is the Monster Cinematic Universe, but I'm sure they're not going to call it the MCU. And the end sequence was kind of like, okay, I mean, fine. I'm sure Tom Hiddleston's like a pro at these post-credit sequences at this point. It doesn't really get me excited for anything they have planned for like the King Kong Godzilla meetup movie. I've already seen that movie and I wasn't a huge fan. In terms of just what this was, it was a lot of fun, and I don't usually have fun at a lot of Hollywood blockbusters like this. Kong Skull Island got, at least for the most part, that, and when it stuck to doing just its fun, ridiculous kind of set piece action sequences, even though they kind of called them out before going into them, even if they were very obvious, it worked in a very stupid, obvious blockbuster way, and that's kind of the fun with it. But if you're searching for anything more from it, and anytime this movie's asking you to search for more from it, it really plays as dumb as it is when it's fun as well. And if you're just looking for dumb fun, I think you'll be really happy taking a trip to Skull Island. So if you have seen Kong Skull Island and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.